Yay! Hello and welcome to this Python BoF, Python Team BoF. We have some discussion points that have been written down in Gobi. If you want to join us through IRC, Stefan will be happy to try to relay your question through IRC. And the first item on our list is Python 3.11. Doko, if you have something here.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. Just I think 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement upstream that the release schedule is a little bit late, and instead of having a release in October, they say it will be December. Maybe not that late, but so yeah, it's most likely that it's late by 1 to 2 months. I think this week the release schedule for Python 3.12 was announced, and they tried to move it back to a release in early October 2023. Problem, we have the freeze for Debian in mid of January, and so we have 1 or 2 months, and the question is, do we want to try to update to 3.11, or do we want to delay that until the freeze is over? And yeah, so when did we have the last release? It was in July last year or August last year?
Yes, but hopefully this time it's going to be earlier in, I don't know, May. If everything goes well, we can't tell in advance.
Why do you believe that?
Because it happened in the past.
Well, we can ask the release manager.
Two releases ago. And the fact it was delayed for 2 months more was because there was some issues with DI and these graphic cards without firmware. Otherwise, it would have been released in May.
Well, but that's
so anyway, that's not the question. Is do we want to do it or not, right?
Yes.
So from my side, I don't mind trying, but we have to be able to go back if it's not ready. That's my opinion. Because, like, do you have any idea of what is what can be a problem?
Well, you saw the last transitions as well, so you should have an idea yourself what goes wrong.
Yeah, about 20 packages needed fixes. Some things that were deprecated were removed, and then things broke.
How much do you think we can prepare this transition with like betas of Python 3.11?
Well, I think we don't need betas. We can use release candidates. And I think the release, or even now the current beta is considered as ABI stable. And yeah, so the big question is, when do upstreams go with a new Python version? And I don't see many upstreams playing with beta releases. So maybe release candidates, but
and I guess the other question that needs to be taken into account is the support lifetime of 3.10. Like, is this enough for the duration of Bookworm?
So I think upstream only supports for 2 years, but I would have to look again. And after that, you have some source releases, so which are fine for us. Yeah, but if you want to support old stable or a long-term support release, then you have to do that on your own anyway. So the nice thing about Python or Python transitions is that we separate them in 3 steps. And as long as we just add a new Python version and don't change the default, it's very easy to just revert that. The worst case scenario which then can happen is that we ship packages which are bigger than, with one extension built. Then we would have some extensions built twice for 3.10 and 3.11. But that's okay. After we change the default to 3.11, it's much more difficult to revert back to the old version. And we had some special packages like, I think, number or Dart, or so all stuff on top of NumPy and SciPy, which took a while to stabilize. And it was only stabilized with new upstream versions. So it's more likely that we would need some buy-in or agreement from the release team that for these cases we would get exceptions to update to new upstream versions for some packages which are high in the stack.
You said pandas and NumPy?
No, number. I think Dart was one example which...
Maybe somebody can write that. Sorry.
N-U-M-B-A.
Number. Okay,
Dart.
yeah.
Like playing darts.
I think our experience with Number recently has been they don't add support. I've got a mic.
It's hidden by the beard.
They don't add support until after the Python final release is out. They begin to start looking at it. So it's usually been taking a few months after final release. This does depend on the changes in the language, of course. But
just for my understanding, why is switching the default version back harder than switching it forward?
Well, just doing a Python 3 defaults upload to remove Python 3.11 as supported, that's easy, that's one upload. So if you want to change back the default version, you have to, well, undo the whole stack.
But isn't that as complicated as switching the default forward? I just want to understand.
Switching it back, okay, you might need an epoch bump again on the Python 3 defaults packages. And you need to, do the same thing. Well, it's again a transition because there are some extensions in the stack which are just built for one Python version. So yes, it can be done, but it's more complicated than just removing 3.11 as a supported version.
so we should think very carefully before switching defaults and transition and experimental first. We should think very carefully before switching default version.
But of course, the problem of uploading to experimental is that the problem is with all the rebuilds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how useful it would even be to try and do the rebuilds in experimental. I don't know
I'm with
how
you.
easy that is. I guess with the, well, not the 3.10, because that added I think the problem with 3.10 was mostly that it added an additional digit to the number behind the decimal point. I think the 3.9 transition wasn't that difficult to handle. I mean, if it's similar like that one.
There were lots of standard library changes in 3.10 as well. I mean, there's always a pile of them.
And I think 3.9 came with a new keyword. Or was it 3.8? I can't remember.
Just a comparison, Ruby always release on Christmas, and we never even tried to take that release into the next, before the freeze, which is usually in the beginning of the following year. We just go with the one from the previous Christmas, because, I mean, and the Python team has a lot more packages than the Ruby one. We have 1,400 maybe. I think the Python team has a lot more than that, and it's probably too risky. I mean, we could switch, well, we could enable 3.11 and try to see the size of the breakage, but I think switching the default should be, well, should be able to make a decision maybe if we stage the transition with release candidates and betas. Is there anything out yet?
So, say again.
Is there any pre-release published yet?
Any what?
Any
Pre-release.
Pre-release or a beta release candidate, preview
So
release?
the beta 4 is in the archive. It's unstable. So yeah, you can build your stuff against 3.11. On the other hand, as long as the most basic extensions are not yet supported, it's very difficult to do that.
I think Nicola asked a question before about the support of 3.10. Do we know? No?
1 second, I had that. 3.10 end of life is October 2026 upstream.
So we would probably be okay.
The whole life cycle of the next table. So that's the whole life cycle of the next table. So why should we take the risk if we have support from upstream? The only issue would be LTS then.
Because our users appreciate it if we got to have the latest stable release and our stable release.
Yeah, correct. And there's also the optimization is 25% faster, they say.
Oh, it should be.
So yeah, that's one more thing. So people are working upstream on speed optimizations. I didn't check 3.11 yet, but it's an ongoing process. So you will see more of these in 3.12 and 3.13. So yeah, having the latest stable release also gives a performance boost.
Would it be possible to have 3.11 as an extra supported version in the stable release?
I don't mind. The problem is that not everything will be supported by 3.11, and then you install some package, and you're wondering why it works with 3.10 but not 3.11. Yeah, I'm not sure about which extension modules these are, but yeah.
Can this be something that we can monitor with archive rebuilds or archive rebuilds, like automated archive rebuilds?
So testing a Python transition with archive rebuilds is not possible because first you have to, well, usually we have, I can't remember, around 20 or 25 stages. And with an archive rebuild, you only catch issues in stage 1. So first you have to fix all issues in stage 1, and then you are able to see if there are problems in stage 2 and further up. And yeah, that's a difficulty. Also, I mean, in the past, I think Graham this time, we were preparing the first 2 or 3 stages in the PPA, in Launchpad. But then it takes a lot of time to keep the current state of rebuilds current, with the other part of the distro also moving. And so at some point we say, okay, now we have to move to the transition. We have to move the transition to the archive and continue the transition in the archive. And so, yes, you can prepare a transition, a small transition in a PPA or in a, well, private archive or a team archive. But there are a lot of stakeholders using Python in many, many different teams. So getting them all, or getting buy-in from them to do this work in a team archive is difficult, to say at least.
And if you were to decide without our opinion, what would you do? If you were to decide by your own without any other opinion, what would you do? What's your personal opinion about what we shall do?
Well, I mean, I would try to do it, provided that I get buy-in from the release team to have some upstream transitions during the freeze period. Because doing that plus backports to old Python versions is not that doable from my point of view. And applications high in the stack don't tend to break many unrelated areas.
I know that I would be angry if, let's say, I've been packaging some applications for the Bookworm release and we decide to switch to a new Python version and my upstream doesn't follow and I've been packaging for like 2 years, making sure everything works, and then the thing I wanted to have in the archive doesn't make it unstable yet another time because some fixes happened too late. And I think I was frustrated the first time that happened. I'd be even more frustrated if I missed the second release because of that. I think we should take that into account.
So if we are to take the route to 3.11, it'd be preferable to have it as an available version as soon as possible so that we can have at least unit tests and fix stuff early. Even a beta
again,
version.
I'm trying to say that you can do that now, but you can't do that in reality because all the basic stuff that you, for example, need now to build stuff is not there, it's not yet built. And you cannot currently say, we only built stage 1 and 2 as supported, and then let it transition to testing. That doesn't work. We have to, well, build everything.
To me, the whole conversation seems to be that like it would be more prudent to stay with 3.10 for now and to aim for other versions, maybe more stable versions for Trixie. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of work, probably break a lot of stuff. And if we really want this stable release, 3.10 would be the better choice.
So when did we release last year? Was it early August? When was the Debian release, the last one?
I aim for a very short release. I hate freezes, so...
We all hate freezes.
Yeah, that's exactly why I tried to avoid it.
Yes.
I think last time we were more or less ready when we started, except for the item that was already mentioned. So we could have released in 2 months. And then, I mean, like, end of March.
I mean, the difficulty will be if we release again in August, then the question will be, do we transition to 3.11 or do we transition to 3.12?
That's a problem for after the release.
We've been talking about this topic for 20 minutes now. The BoF is 45 minutes. We can continue talking about this, or we can take a decision, or we can move and decide to push this, but we should take a decision about what we do now. If we want to continue talking about this or talk about other topics we wanted to talk about.
Maybe who would prefer? Who would prefer to stay on 3.10? I would. Who here would prefer 3.11?
Well, the first try. That would be the third alternative.
Okay, so we can move on maybe.
Okay, so I think we've had a good discussion. Maybe this can continue in the mailing list. Let's maybe have some time to think about this. Another topic we wanted to talk about was PEP 668. Maybe Stefano, you want to introduce that?
Sure. So last year at the PyCon US, we had, at the Language Summit, we got together with some other distros and had a Python in distros discussion. And one of the things that came out of it was all of the distros have issues with pip stomping on distro managed packages. So let's have a standard to stop that, so we can stop patching pip to do what we want. We can have pip upstream, and upstream supported by a pip mechanism to say, this is a distro managed area. You really don't want pip installing things there, or whatever your favorite installation tool is. So there is a protocol for marking a site packages directory, or dist packages in our case, as being distro managed and not something that local administrator tools like pip should install packages into. We should probably mark our Python our site packages directory with that, now that it exists. Pip doesn't support it yet, but they seem keen to. I just went looking now, I can't find any bug in the bug tracker about it. Let's talk to them. But yeah, eventually this means we can get rid of one of our most difficult issues with pip.
Right, so the most common problem in the past was that you install some module from the distro, then you call pip update or even pip remove, and it breaks or removes the package which you installed by the distro. So that is at least now fixed in newer pip versions. And the second idea is that pip and distro install to two different locations. And work still to do is I would like to see in Python option like -s to only add the distro packages on the path, so you can have in the Debian packaging calling the Python interpreter with that option to only include the side pack or dist packages where you install distro extensions. So you don't break your desktop applications written in Python by using pip and things like that.
And I could imagine developers wanting the alternative option of a Python that doesn't have any distro packages in it. But virtual envs are another way to get that. That seems like a topic of discussion for a next language sprint.
Was that it for PP668? Any other comments? All right, let's move on to PyBuild improvements. Antonio did a merge request on PyBuild, and the idea is to be able to run auto package tests using upstream unit tests instead of us doing it manually. Maybe you want to talk about it some more, Antonio?
I need to test this some more. If people have tested it and played with it, please give your feedback. Yeah, the idea seemed sound. When I tested an earlier iteration, I saw problems. I need to just go back and test it more.
Yeah, I remember fixing a bunch of issues from the first iteration. I have tested with 3 or 4 packages. It's all logged into the merge request comments. And from my point of view, it should be ready to go.
Great.
But I'm happy to fix anything anyone finds with other testing in packages. And the nice thing is that I was able to implement it in a way that you can reuse the environment variables from Debian rules so that you don't have to duplicate anything.
So you can use the same testing configuration for your build time tests and your auto PKG tests.
All the options are inherited to the auto package test, and it just works.
Thank you for that. I think, I don't remember who, I think Andreas posted on the mailing list recently about all the packages that didn't have any auto package tests. Instead of us adding auto package tests manually to all of this, I think trying to merge this would be like the right way to go forward.
And, one thing that was mentioned on the auto package test BoF that we might want to consider here is getting GSoccer outreach intern to go through all those packages, because you have to flip the between Debian control to say that you want to use that, because we are not breaking it's too bad that we lost the auto package test package Python to the very superficial tests, but we have to replace the Python with PyBuild to make sure that the package now uses the new infrastructure. And then I think that's an interesting project for an intern, because the changes are really simple and they can do a lot of them and get to know a lot of packages and test them, and so it's probably a good idea to think about that. I can probably help mentoring there.
And it's probably something that can be done with Janma's Lintian brush or all automated things. Maybe something can be done for that. He does rebuild.
It can probably be automated as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else on that topic? Okay, I added this Lintian tags request for the team. I'm happy to write new Lintian tags, so I don't know if people had ideas or requests. If it's not too complex, I'll be happy to try to do something. We have a new Lintian maintainer, so it should eventually get in the archive.
So one thing which would be nice to have is find all packages which build extension just for the default version and not for all supported version. Usually you can only do that in a limited time after you finished stage 1 of the Python transition and before you end or before you start stage 3.
Yeah, that can be probably, I can try to work on that. Any other ideas? You can always ping me on RSC or write me on the mailing list. I'll be happy to do this. I'm getting better with Lintian.
We now got a Lintian tag to suggest people use the PyBuild PyProject helper. So the next big migration is probably pushing packages over to that.
Yep, and it seems to work I wrote those a while ago, and they just been uploaded because there's a new LinkedIn version. So you should actually see a message telling you, oh, your package can now be built using the new PyBuild plugin. This is the package you should install, and it should just work. So,
Is there a Lintian brush for this, so that it can be auto-fixed by the janitor?
I don't think so, no.
Should we maybe ping Jelmer to have a look into it?
I looked in the past at writing Lintian brushes. It's fairly complex. So, yeah. If somebody, yeah.
I assume for him it isn't. Should probably mark the PyBuild prior project plugin as not being experimental anymore. Are we all confident in it?
Yeah.
Okay. And setup tools is emitting deprecation warnings now, so it's reasonable to consider the distutools and setup tools plugins as deprecated too. Ish.
For setup tools, it's a little bit early.
Okay.
Yeah, in Python 3.12, so 3.12 will ship without the distutils module or package. So maybe we could warn about stuff using distutils.version. That's a very common thing. So maybe a Lintian warning for that would be nice. Or to separate one for distutils. But, well, no, you don't need that because that's results in an extra dependencies. Distutils.version is a standard library. So getting a Lintian warning for that would be nice.
And the deprecation you say is for Python 3.12?
Removing in 3.12.
Yeah.
The Python standard library is starting to deprecate and remove modules. We can expect to see a bunch of removals in the next years, I think.
We're good on time. We have maybe 10 minutes left. Upstream CPython patches.
So that was a sprint idea. If we had a sprint, but we didn't have it. I did an exercise I tried to apply all of our CPython patches to PyPy, and in the process that meant figuring out what they were and trying to document them. Docker merged most of my documentation, but in many of these cases, the forwarding has stalled upstream, or they've never been stalled upstream. They've never been forwarded upstream, and I'm sure upstream would like us to reduce our patch set and push. This doesn't need to be a sprint thing. This is something anyone can do from home.
Well, I think you did comment or document the patches in the past.
Yes.
So
There's slightly more information about what they are, but not necessarily what the origin story is or why it is stalled.
Yeah, I think some are not to be upstreamed, and we can, well, go over the list and then see what we should forward. Yeah.
Python 2 removal.
So PyPy is a big blocker there. I had a chat to release people in Noisy the other day. General consensus is I want to try and bundle Python 2.7 source in the Python 3, in the PyPy 3 source package. I'll do an upload of that to experimental and see if a PyPy 3 that's bootstrapped through CPython 2.7 builds reliably on all the arcs. If it doesn't, I might need to keep PyPy 2.7 in that bootstrapping chain as well. We'll see. Upstream's only supported mechanism for building PyPy is building it with PyPy. Bootstrapping through CPython is kind of seen as a weird thing you do once. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Otherwise, do we know how many packages are left?
What was the big one again? Oh, you hang on. That one. So Mozilla dev scripts seem to be the one thing that, and Redland bindings, which I don't even know what that is. Otherwise, we're basically there.
Could you add those to Gobi?
Mm-hmm.
Is Debian infrastructure still using Python 2?
udd.debian.org, or is that all gone now?
I'm pretty sure it's all done now.
Cool.
I guess there's still moin, but
And Malia on IRC reminds us that there's a dep3 header for marking packages that shouldn't be forwarded upstream. I think they're
Patches. Not packages.
all
Patches.
patches, yes.
So do we think it's a possible goal for Bookworm? Removal of these packages? Yeah. Maybe.
I think it's a mandatory goal for us at this point. Politically, if nothing else, we've removed a bunch of packages to get this far.
Maybe it would be a good idea because the freeze is coming pretty soon. Maybe it would be a good idea to have a Python remote sprint. Try to block like 4 days, 3 days, like a Friday and a weekend, and try to remote work on this and other things.
Sure.
I don't know if people would like to participate on that.
Sorry, sprinting on what?
Microphone?
Sorry, sprinting on what?
I think Python 2 removal would be a worthy thing, but also maybe the different PyBuild improvements that we've talked about. There's also QA issues that we haven't talked about, but I just feel that if we don't have like a dedicated moment to work on this, I have doubts this will be resolved.
A great time to try and do that will be after we've added a new version to supported or changed default, and we've got a whole pile of RC bugs to work on.
So then that would be after December, so then maybe January?
December's the release date. We could add supported before release.
Okay.
I mean, as soon as we got an RC, we could do it, right?
December is probably the wrong time to have a sprint, though.
Also true. Although sometimes people are sitting around bored.
The first 2 weeks of December are fine. After, yes, it's strong.
Yeah.
Will we have RCs at the beginning of December? Will we have RC version of Python 3.11 in early December?
Well, yes, because the RC, if you look at the PEP with the 3.11 release schedule, you'll see that the release candidates are about 2 months before the final release. So you should have them in October.
Then anything between that and early December?
I'll try to follow up on this, on the Python list, and we'll see if people are down or not. It's not worth trying to have a remote sprint if nobody wants to join. We still had these general QA thing that was mostly for the sprint, paper cuts. I don't know if anybody has other topics they wanted to mention for this BoF, or else we'll have 4 minutes left. Anything on IRC that we should be discussing?
Nothing on IRC, no.
No QA.
Yeah, I mean, that QA thing makes me think it would be lovely to... I've always wanted to have a team dashboard with all the things that need to be done in the team on it, but someone's got to write the software to make it.
It's a good sprint goal.
Unless such things exist in other teams and we don't...
There used to be this thing called PET,
Yes.
ET, which was kind of... I mean, it kind of died with Salsa. It was a useful dashboard of all the to-do list of a team in terms of bugs, uploads that need to happen, etc., etc.
The package tracker actually has a dashboard. So if you have a team there, you have a dashboard. It could use some improvements, and it is written in Python.
So we should do that.
It's totally on topic.
Otherwise, go ahead.
So, at the last language summit, I tried to ask release managers, so Python release managers, if they would be willing to move the Python releases 1 month early, because it shows that we have some problems getting a release ready in time for our Debian or in the even years for the Ubuntu LTS releases. So the question came from some release manager, well, why doesn't Debian delay their release if they want to include the latest Python version? So, I mean, yes, it's a valid question as well. If I compare the Ubuntu freezes with the Debian freezes, so we have the Ubuntu freezes around mid of February, so it's a month later. So it was a little bit easier for us to get everything for Python 3.10 ready for Ubuntu. For Debian, we have now 1 month less time. So, if it's feasible, I mean, it would be nice to have both sides move a bit, so it could become easier. And we maybe could do better for 3.12 or 3.13.
If I understood correctly that the original release date for Python was earlier, again, I sent out an email as a release manager earlier on the tentative dates. There is a request to everybody to think about their upstreams and their timelines. So if you see these kind of conflicts early up when we put those times in place, then the feedback and information is useful.
I think with the current 6-month cadence, it could really happen. We can accept that Debian will freeze at any point and we'll make it work.
I think that's all the time we've had. Thank you all for coming. I think it's been a good BoF. Thanks.
Thank you.